Imagine being a young child and growing up in a house that oftentimes felt like a war zone and feeling as if you had to walk on eggshells or apologizing constantly to de-escalate situations or enduring abuse to such a degree that you've blocked out most of your childhood as a result. That was my life for 11 years. And unfortunately, I carried that trauma into relationships and repeated cycles of abuse. My name is Mullissa Caroline. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault. This podcast is meant to empower you along your healing journey, regardless of where you may be at on that journey, and regardless of whatever has led you to heal your trauma. We all have trauma, and none of us like to talk about it. But I think the biggest step towards healing is when we can look beneath the surface of a trigger and start asking ourselves questions so that we can have an honest and open conversation. And so this podcast is just another resource for you to help you along the way. And I hope you'll stick around. Here's some things I have to say, because I think the more we are informed of the traumas and abuse that's occurring around us, the more impact we can have, and maybe the more change we can create. And maybe we can save a life. Because as sad as it may be, oftentimes abuse and trauma leads to so many other things like suicide or human trafficking. And so, like I said, I hope you'll stick around on this journey with me. Here's some things I have to say, and together I hope we can heal and hopefully create some sort of positive change in the world so we can break cycles together. Hello. I never know how to start these. Today I want to talk to you about non-attachment is what I like to call it, because I think some people call it being detached or unattached. I'm just going to call it non-attached, but basically it's removing attachment and not needing approval or validation from another person. Because I think sometimes we get attached to the outcome of things or people, and we forget to let go. We haven't learned to let go. We haven't learned to let go. And so that's what this video is about. It's about letting go, moving on, and not having attachment to someone or something. Okay, so my name is Mullissa Caroline, and I like to come on here and talk about my healing journey in hopes that it will inspire and impact others and empower you to do the same, or maybe just help you along your journey in some capacity. So I hope you stick around and hear some things I have to say. It's trauma trigger warning here. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I don't like to say survivor. I like to consider myself a warrior at this point, but I was a victim of that, of childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And so a lot of times in my videos, I will be talking about, I may bring up a topic that may be triggering for someone. If that is you, please click off of this video. This is probably not a good thing for you to watch, but I just want to get that disclaimer. I'm also not a therapist. These are all just opinions and based on my experience and things that I've learned along this journey. So today I want to talk about letting go. This is more than just an Elsa song from the movie Frozen, which is where my brain went. I don't know if that's you, but I'm a Disney nerd, so my brain immediately went to Frozen, and the song Let It Go is just all that I could think about. So we're going to talk about letting go. And, you know, how you can act. Did you know that you can actually become a source of your own validation? So a lot of times what happens is whenever we are upset about something, it's because we're not getting a need met. A need is not being met for us. And we think that need should be met by someone, and they're not meeting it. And what actually we should be doing is figuring out what that need is and giving it to ourselves. So you can actually be the source of your own validation and approval. The way that you could do that is you could figure out your belief system. What beliefs do you have? And these could stem from childhood, because most of mine do. What beliefs do you have around neediness, validation? Where are those in your childhood? Because like for me, it stemmed from my mother and my stepfather. So I had two things going on. But the thing I realized most recently is with my mom, and it had to do with my sister. And my sister had a lot of health problems growing up. She had epilepsy. So she used to have what they called grandma seizures, and she was on medication for that. And so my sister got a certain type of treatment, and my mom was so busy taking care of her and focusing on her. And I know this now because I've reframed it, but at the time I didn't. So what I know now is that my mom was doing the best she could in that situation to take care of my sister. But in the moment, what I was thinking about was, why am I not worthy of her paying attention to me? And I didn't think I was worthy of love unless I was showing her that I was able to take care of my sister. Or it wasn't even just that, though. It was like anytime I did really good in school, because my sister had a learning disability on top of that. So, and I was this like A and B student, like studious and just a thirst for knowledge. And I would often dim my light to not outshine her, my sister, or make her feel a certain type of way. So those are some issues that I figured out that I had, that I was carrying into adult life. Now, the other aspect of that has to do with my stepdad. Now, I was sexually abused from the age of 7 till I was 18, and I moved out. I was emotionally, physically, mentally, every aspect of the word abuse, it happened to me. And some of that abuse actually continued even after I moved out. But one of the things that I realized when I was going through these belief systems is something that I carried into my adult life, because he wasn't always abusive. We did have these moments where he tried to act like a dad, which was so messed up for me. And this is going to go into trauma bonding. And so just, you might, if you can't listen to any of this stuff, probably shouldn't be watching this video, but I carried this into my adult life, and here's how. Because I would take whatever he was able to give me. So he was only able to be a dad to me in certain moments, and others he was very mean to me. But I allowed him, as I was getting older in my teenage years, I started to realize what was actually going on. I think I was like 17. But I still continued to allow him to treat me this way. Now, that's not me saying it's my fault that he was behaving the way that he was. I'm just giving you a perspective. So I'm starting to realize that this is not normal behavior, and the way that he's treating me. But I continued to allow it because I liked those moments where he was actually, present with me and a dad. And so I just took whatever I could get, and I carried this into adult relationships. I allowed people to treat me poorly. I took whatever I could get. Okay. So it's just to offer you perspective. I don't know if that's you, but that's something that I did. And the thing is we repeat these patterns. Like I would attract people into my life that I would constantly need to, mostly females, would need to seek some sort of validation or approval from to feel good about myself. And with my male relationships, I would take whatever I could get, even if they were treating me like crap, and I would allow them to abuse me and mistreat me. But that validation and approval seeking was there too with my stepdad. And so I had both sides. I was attracting friendships and relationships that were not healthy for me. So the thing is, you have to become aware of the belief, and you're going to have to do some digging to figure out what these beliefs are. And sometimes it's just something that we crave that we can actually give ourselves. And becoming aware of the belief and why we craved it is super important. And just realizing that these are wounds that we can heal. It takes time, but they can be healed, they can be worked through. And that's great news, because then it's a problem that you can fix. And it's not your fault. Just, I think we sometimes, I did this even after my mom and my stepdad divorced. I did this, and I'd already moved out of the house at this point. Then when they divorced, and I blamed myself because my mom had finally figured out what was happening all those years, and the abuse and the things that were going on. And, based on my conditioning and stuff, I blamed myself for them getting divorced, which is so crazy to think about now, but that's what happens. So, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that someone abused you as a child. You were a helpless, defenseless child. It is not your fault that someone mistreated you as a child. It's not your fault that your parents divorced. That's their crap, not your crap. That's, not your, what's the phrase? Not my monkeys, not my circus. That's what I like to say. And I think it's really important that we start realizing that a lot of the things that our parents were doing the best they can with what they had. And my stepdad's reality was trauma based, and he was operating from a perspective of someone had hurt him. So his way of gaining control was to gain control over me and my sister. And that's not excusing his behavior, because what he did was wrong. That's just me understanding it and having some sort of capacity for compassion and understanding. It's not okay what happened. But I think on the path to forgiveness, it's important to have that understanding. And so, and my mom did the best that she could with my sister, with raising my sister. I'm sure I can't even imagine having a kid with a disability and on top of that, epilepsy and seizures and all these medical things going on with her. And then, having two kids and trying to figure out how to be a mom for both. I don't think I could what she did, but I think she did the best she could with what she had and with the level of consciousness that she had. And that's not excusing it. Again, that's just understanding where she was coming from. And so the other thing is just realizing that don't latch on to anything basically and just take it on as something that you were responsible for is super important, because a lot of times we're carrying around things we shouldn't even be carrying around. We're attaching meaning and things just to things we shouldn't even be attaching meaning to, and we shouldn't be carrying around those things either. So the next thing is to stop saying yes to things, which is something I have learned and still learning to not say yes to certain things, to learn to say no. And I think this is trauma based as well. But to offer you a different perspective, anytime that you say yes to something that you don't want to do, you're abandoning self. And I was doing this so many times. Friends would invite me to go somewhere and I wouldn't want to go. I would need to be this happened in college, especially. I would need to study or prepare for a test or something. And instead of studying and doing what I needed to do because I had a test or I needed to write a paper, I would say no to myself and my education and go party with a friend, which I usually regretted. It was just all bad. So stop saying yes to things at the expense of yourself, and set healthy boundaries. Sorry, I had notes here. I'm just going through my notes. So saying yes to others is saying no to you. Now you can say yes to some things. I'm just saying, if you don't want to do something, you don't have to do it. Okay, now, and there's different things other things that go along with that. If it's something that's going to help you step out of your comfort zone, and the reason why you don't want to go is because you're scared, now that's a whole different thing. What I'm talking about is sacrificing certain aspects of your life and things that you want to do for someone else's happiness, and realizing that their opinions or beliefs about you are not yours, and showing up for yourself, and not waiting for someone to show up for you. And that's not to say people won't, it's just you show up first. And yeah, so it's basically like I was saying with my classes, I failed one of my classes in college, or almost failed it. I think I almost failed it. I was able to bring the grade back up, I think, at some point, but because I was trying to make my friends happy by going out with them, I wanted to be cool, I was like, no, this is all bad. And yeah, so I was basically at the expense of myself and what I wanted to do. Yeah, and I've done that in relationships too. I stayed longer than I needed to just because I wanted to try to make it work or try to fix the other person. That's another like bad habit that I had that comes from my childhood, being a people pleaser and trying to fix the other person and taking on projects and attracting these people, like just so bad, all bad. So what I had to learn was I'm not responsible for someone else's emotions. I'm not responsible for their healing journey. It's not my job to fix you. That's all on the other person, and just not taking on that responsibility, and also their opinions or beliefs and things like that. So next thing is so just realizing that your reality is constantly changing. This is something I'm still learning. I actually watched this in a video the other day, and I'll leave it linked down below so that you can check it out. But one of the things he talks about is realizing your reality is constantly changing. And so being present with yourself, and I guess that's really just an overall theme of life in general, right? Everything is constantly changing. You're constantly changing. People around you are constantly changing. The world is constantly changing. Everything is in this state of change. So being present with yourself and the present moment is super helpful. Now, practicing mindfulness can be really hard for someone who, like me, who has childhood trauma to the severity that I have it. Mindfulness has been really hard to practice because a lot of times what happens for me is I will be trying to practice mindfulness, and a memory will come to the surface that I haven't thought about in years, which is a good sign because it's probably something I need to work through and heal, but it doesn't feel good, right? So it's really hard to work through those things when they come up. So approach that with a little bit of caution, because I think everyone's different, and how you show up in that is really dependent on you and what happens in that space. And a therapist can really help you walk through those things. So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole with that, but it's important not to linger in these old energies. And it's like he says in the video, everything can become nostalgic at some point, and it's true. When you remain, it's just like remaining attached to anything, whether that's an energy, a memory, a person, an object. Like if I was attached to my computer, or like being attached to your animals, those sorts of things, it's basically creating resistance. And when you create resistance, it makes it harder for things to come towards you, because you're trying to hold on, you're trying to grab something, everything in you to grab it. And it just, desire and suffering create resistance. So and I feel like that's what he's talking about in this video, is basically when you are attached to something, it's desire. At the end of the day, attachment is desire. And when you desire something, you can't have it, or it would hurt you if it left, or it brings up your abandonment wounds if you think about it leaving, then you're creating your own suffering. And this is all creating resistance. So just realize that things are going to change. Sometimes relationships don't work out. Sometimes people leave. It's okay. Let them go. And it's easier said than done, but The next thing is, and this kind of ties into that, because our reality is a reflection of the things we think and feel about ourselves. So it's really important to, like I was saying earlier, to change those beliefs, because then it's going to change what's being reflected back to you. And then you're not going to be attaching yourself to people that are not good for you and desiring things that are not good for you. You're not going to be having things reflected back to you that you don't like. And you're going to stop attracting people that you don't like, that make you feel like just a certain type of way, like, oh, I've dated this person. This is just, you're just in a different body, but I've dated you like 6 times now, And so, and this is another thing he says, we tend to attract people that we're familiar with, but what I think it is basically it's our energy, because of the things that we think, the beliefs that we have turn into things that we think, things that we speak, and the things that we do, and then we attract people. So like repeating old cycles. You can repeat old cycles from childhood too. I've done this with many different partners. You're basically just casting people into roles in your movie and replaying an old scene from your childhood. I've done it. It sucks. So why not dig up that belief of where that's coming from? Change the way your inner dialogue, things that you're thinking and speaking to yourself, but also things that you're saying out loud, and things that you're doing change as well. And your whole energy changes, and the things that you attract into your life change as well. And forgiveness is a huge part of this. I went on a huge forgiveness thing with my stepdad. I'm currently learning to forgive my mom, because I realized last year or a couple of years ago that I carry resentment towards her for some of the things, and I didn't know that I was carrying that around. This is why therapy is so important. So I realized I was carrying resentment around that I needed to work through. And so that's forgiveness is huge for this, because a lot of times we're hanging on to, like I said earlier, we're hanging on to crap that we just don't need to be carrying around. And forgiveness is not saying that what someone did to you is okay. Forgiveness is accepting that they were operating with the information that they had, the level of consciousness that they had based on the experiences that they had. Okay. Having compassion for them, and that understanding will allow you to let go of that experience and see it for what it was, and learn from it and grow from it. And I know it's like if you're not this far into being able to forgive someone, this is going to sound so foreign to you. But I'm going to tell you, when I did the work, and I'm still doing the work, but with my stepdad, I was able to let go of all the resentment and the anger that I had towards him. And I felt sorry for him, if I'm being perfectly honest. It's not okay what he did to me. It's a terrible thing that he did to me and my sister. But at the end of the day, I didn't want to keep carrying that around into new relationships and keep casting men to be my stepdad. I mean, I even to this day, I have, if I had to tell myself this person is not him, I was like getting to that point of forgiving someone, and it helps you heal a trigger response to situations when you learn to heal. And so understanding behavior doesn't make it right. Okay. It just allows you to forgive. And, I feel like we give meaning to a lot of things. And I think sometimes it can depend on the type of meaning that you give it. So one of the things we did in my trauma therapy was we would go back to an old experience, and she would have me reframe it so that I would show up as my adult self and stand up to my stepdad. So I wasn't a child anymore. I was now an adult, which was really powerful, because then it changed the emotions tied to that situation, and that gave me a lot of power. It was really beneficial. So outer reality changes when we change inner reality, and your reality is a reflection of who you're showing up as. And so elevating yourself to higher states of consciousness, it starts with forgiveness. and giving things meaning based on experiences that you've had is usually stemming from early childhood. This is what happens when someone says, well, because of insert crappy childhood here experience, this is why I'm acting the way that I'm acting. Have you ever heard anybody say this? I've said this. I will own that. It's giving meaning to your actions based on something that happened to you, and it's just not, it's not a good feeling. But and the other thing is, excuse me, sometimes we have to forgive ourselves too when we say those things. But forgiveness is just basically removing the meaning that you gave it. Because like for me, like when my parents got divorced, my stepdad and my mom, I thought if I hadn't talked about what bad things were happening, they would still be. That's not mine. It's not my fault. That it's not my fault that he abused me either. It's not my fault that my mom was only able to give me a certain level of attention. None of those things are my fault. It's really like, it takes a minute for these things to sink in, but I need you to hear me when I say that it is not your fault. And that because my mom wasn't able to give me what I needed does not mean that I am not worthy of love. It does not mean that I need constant approval from an outside source either. And it's basically just realizing that's not your crap, it's their crap. Not my monkeys, not my circus. So take back the meaning. Changing, I was talking about that earlier, change the meaning of past events. Meaning is often tied to a belief. So when we change the meaning, we change the belief. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is he called it killing the payoff. I call it killing the outcome. And he's like, we have an attachment to an outcome of a situation. And if we stay in a relationship because we think that like the outcome of us leaving would be us feeling abandoned or being alone or not having safety, comforts, or that we just weren't good enough. If someone leaves us, that we're just not good enough, we're not worthy. That's what I'm talking about, the outcome, what you think is going to happen, essentially. And what we often sometimes do, and I've done this, I've tried to, you ever tried to, I feel like it's like a control dive. You like hear those planes that try to do the control dives. It's like your plane is on fire and you're trying to control dive, and you're trying to control that entire situation so that they don't leave. And so we try to fix them, try to take on their problems as our own, so that we don't end up alone. And it's just all bad things. So because when you do that, you're actually abandoning yourself. You're abandoning your relationship with yourself, your love for yourself, your self-respect, your boundaries, your standards, your values. And the thing is like the payoff can be positive or negative. So it's basically changing that payoff or that outcome. I would say outcome from a negative to a positive. So for me, like ending my last relationship was not thinking that, that they were going to be better off without me, or they were going to find somebody else, or that they would suddenly change and be with somebody else. That was one of them. Like he's suddenly going to have an epiphany moment and he's going to become a different person and she's going to get to experience like crazy stuff. Okay. And then just going, okay, but if he does decide to change, that's a good thing, because then he's going to show up as a different person in the world. And if somebody else gets to experience it, that's how it's supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be the one to experience that with him, and that's okay. I just let go. Now, I also realized something from this video that I watched as well, and he talks about attachment to an abuser, and how, because my stepdad was very controlling, and I didn't realize that that control thing was almost like a safety thing. And so I did not realize that, but that's an excellent point. So it felt safe for me. And so I think a lot of times, like even just in most of my relationships, I've stayed because it's safe, because it's comfortable, because the unknown is scary. And so we stay in these relationships that are not any good for us because it's what we know. And the thing is like, I've stayed too because I feel fear of failure, fear of looking like a failure, because social media is so bad about this too. But you have to realize that everything you see on social media is not actually how anything is, and the reality of that relationship is not, but I think the other aspect of that is we think that people have this like idealized version of how our relationship is. And so to go and like, oh yeah, so we're breaking up, it feels like a failure. And so I had to let go of that too, because that's someone else's opinion. Because I don't think I failed. I think I learned and I grew, and yeah, it failed, but I'm not a failure. I'm not this awful, terrible person because a relationship didn't work out. It's fine. I was more worried about what other people were going to say, and I had to realize that those are not my monkeys, not my circus. Whatever people think about me, their opinions, it's none of my business. And so when you are, attracted to people, because I've had people enter my life too, that tried to control certain aspects of my life too. That was me repeating my past again, and it's all about basically just starting to treat everything as a learning experience was a huge game changer for me. So when I started, like especially after this last breakup, when I decided I was going to say no to 6 months of depression, and I decided I was going to take control of my crap and work through my triggers and work through my emotions. And then, a long time ago, I realized that everything is just a learning experience. So that was the other aspect of this. Like, let's just treat it as a learning experience, and just kind of just being vulnerable too, because I've shared my story quite a bit over on Facebook. That was the other thing that was super powerful for me. Opening up like that is foreign to me, but I knew I had to do it. I had to get that out there because it needed to be said, it needed to be done, and it could be done in a graceful, classy, tactful way. And so I think and this is something he talks about in the video as well, so I'm going to give him credit where credit is due, but it is something I believed before I ever watched his video. But because it's something I've been on a journey for this year, was because my heart chakra was blocked. And so I was going on a journey of like opening that space and learning. I had a blocked throat chakra too. So that was one other reason why I went on Facebook and started talking and stuff. So, but once I've become more vulnerable and more open, my whole energy has changed, has shifted. And I've noticed that I don't do it for anything other than just to share. I hope that makes sense. Like, I used to get really caught up in like, oh, nobody's reading my posts, and like I would have to do like engagement posts. I usually got really heavy into doing engagement posts to get that, which is fine, to do those, but to be on Facebook every 5 minutes to see how content is doing is a little obsessive and crazy. And so once I just stopped caring about that and just started thinking in the aspect of, I'm just going to share because this is something I just need to say, and not attaching any sort of meaning or outcome, everything changed. And then just basically just being authentic and not being attached to other people's opinions, because that was the other reason why it took me so long to share anything on social media, is out of fear of what other people might say. And so once I detached myself, non-attachment from those things, once I had non-attachment from those things, which I'm still working on, I'm not perfect, I still slip every once in a while. I imagine I'm going to look back at this video in a year and probably go, wow, probably be in a way better place than I am now. But Once I did all of these things, that's when everything started shifting for me. I'm still in the midst of that shift, but I wanted to share what I had recently learned. And letting go can be easy. It doesn't seem like it, but it can be, and it does get easier with time. And you build that resilience. And I think adversity helps with that. When we're faced with adversities, we build that resilience. And so that's why we have challenges in our lives, is to help us become stronger. And that's not just, I'm not condoning abuse. Okay. Abuse is messed up. It should not happen to any human being on this planet. Okay. It's not what I'm talking about. But there are challenges that we experience in our adult lives that we can use to make ourselves stronger and to become better versions of ourselves and grow and reach higher levels of consciousness. So I hope this made sense. And I hope if it did, that you will give it a like, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment. It's all free ways that you can help the channel grow and support each other in the comments too. I think that's a really great way to support each other. And if you have anything you want to share as well. I'm gonna go. I'm always terrible at ending these, but anyways, thank you so much for sticking all the way to the end. It does mean so much for me. And I hope to create positive space on here where, hopefully we can grow it together. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Remember to always be kind to yourself, kind to others, make good choices, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.